In the last video, we talked about arrays in detail, all its theory. Today, we will talk about the code section of the array, how we code arrays and how we deal with arrays during our program or during our coding. So, let's begin by declaring a simple integer array. So, to declare an integer array, first you have to write int, which tells that it's gonna be an array. Then you use this symbol, a pair of square brackets, which indicates that it is not a normal integer, it will be an integer array, a collection of variables. So, array is basically a collection of similar variables bundled together. Suppose you want to store 100 different numbers. Now you can't, you have one way is to make 100 variables and store each value into their respective variables. But to avoid this problem, we simply use array. So instead of creating 100 variables, we can store all those 100 values in a box, arrays like a box in an array. So this is the point of arrays. That's why we use arrays to store multiple values of a given data type. So let's go back to its declaration. So first you write int, then square brackets. Then you have to write array's name. In that case, let's call it my array. You can give it any name. Then now you have your array declared, right? Now we have an array, but it doesn't have a size. Remember that each array must has a size before it can be used. You must pass a size to an array before it can be used in our program. So size indicates the total number of values it can hold. So to give it a size, you can either give it here after declaration. You have to first write the object name, then you have to write the new keyword, and then you have to again write the class name. uh, so and then you have to write the size. So let's write 10 here. If we write 10 here, now it will hold 10 values, so it can store 10 numbers. And now our array is able to store 10 values, 10 integers. Or if you don't want to do this, you can do this directly just like you do with variables. You can use the new keyword here, and then you have to use the data type, and then you can pass the size here, which can be 10. So that's how now we have an array. We have 10 memory locations available to us in which we can hold different integer values. So now you can think of it like a box. Now suppose a box is formed in a memory. Currently all values are 0. So if you want to access a specific part of that box, uh, you have to use indexing. So to access a value, memory location, you have to first type your array name. Then you have to use the index. So array values are stored like this. So the first value will be at 0th index, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, then 8, then 9. So now, just like strings, if you know about strings, if you have seen the strings video or the arrays theory video, uh, all values are stored at particular indexes. So each element of an array is stored at index. So index start from 0 and it ends at size minus 1. That is 10 minus 1. So it can hold 10 values. So to store a value at a particular index, you have to do is my array. Then you have to type index like 0, and then you have to pass the value. Let's input 12 here. Now this my array now this index is holding the value 12 into it. And then let's try printing this value. my array 0. Now to print, let's run it. As you can see, we are getting 12 here, since at index 0 we stored a value of 12. Let's try printing 1, index value at 1. So as you can see, the index 1 is currently empty. We have only accessed and filled this index. Also, the one advantage of arrays is that it allows random access. You can randomly access any index and store your value. For example, after this 0, you don't have to store the value at 1. You can simply store it at 4. Let's suppose you want to store it at 4th index. So let's give it 17. So after printing, so let's print both our indexes that we have filled so far. So now let's see what is at 4th index. I'm gonna change it to 0. Um, so as you can see, 12 and 17 both are getting printed here, since we have specified given the values. And instead of doing that, you can do this, like you can store the value at like, let's say 6. So now array 0 will be empty and array 4 will be 17. So as you can see, it is array 0 index is 0, which is the default value if it is empty. And let's give it let's run the 6th index here. So as you can see, we are getting both values printed here. So uh, if you don't understand indexing, watch the previous video. But indexing works like this. An array, when you declare an array of size 10 of any size, you have, for example, here 10, you have 10 blocks. You can think of 10 different blocks formed in your memory together, and each block is represented by an index, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Indexing starts from 0. It doesn't start from 1. So just like string indexing, it also starts from 0, and it ends at 9. Since it starts from 0, its last index will be 9. If we count from 0, our 10th value will be 9. And what happens if you try to access something out of the uh, let's suppose you want to store value at 10, index 10. So let's store 33. Let's see what happens now. So as you can see, we are getting an exception that index 10 is out of range for length 10. Since our size means length, our length is 10, and 10 is out of bounds. 9 is the maximum index we can go up to. Similarly, if you want to try to excel like negative 5, it's also out of range. So as you can see, it is telling us that it is out of bounds, out of range. Our possible values, our possible indexes are from 0 to 9. But if you increase the size, let's say you change the size to 100, now you can access more location, like you can store value at 44th index. So let's try printing for the 44th index here. So as you can see, 33 is getting printed here. So this is the how you declare a basic array. So let's create another array. Let's use string data type. Similarly, you have to write this your data, your variable type, then array type, I mean. Then you have to use square brackets. Then you give it name like string names. Now names will store the names of all students. And let's suppose we have 5 students. So we have 5 students. We want to store name of each student. So let's store the name of 0th index. Let's store John. Similarly, let's store at the first index, that is our second location, and let's call it Bell. Now let's store a name at second index. Let's call it Jake, and let's store at a third index. and we're gonna call it Jack. Let's store a name at fourth index, and we're gonna call it Arthur. So we have given uh, five. We have accessed all five blocks of this, all five blocks of our array. Now our array is fully populated. You can try printing it. So print. Let's print any value. You can print all of them, but I'm gonna just print the 0th. So let's run it. As you can see, we are getting our 0th, our first element here, John, which is at 0th index. Also, you can't access the fifth index since all five values have been accessed. And let's see. Let me show you one more way to declare an array. So you can initialize it directly instead of doing it later. Like you can give it values directly. You can pass it values directly. For example, let's say you want to store five numbers. Um, five numbers. So I will use the int. I will call it x. Or let's call it nums. Then instead of doing the new int part, use curly brackets. Then list your values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or let's add 6 as well. So now we have declared an array of array called nums, and it is of size 6 since it has 6 values. But notice we didn't need to give it a size. Since our compiler is intelligent enough to count these values and auto assign its size. So our compiler will count these values and it will know its size. So you don't need to give your array size if you are declaring it like this. If you are passing values at with the declaration, then you don't need to pass size since our compiler already will calculate all these elements and will auto find the size. And let's try printing the last element so we can see that it's working. Let's print nums 5 since it is of size 6. Our last index is 5. Now we got 6 here. So similarly you can create a string array, but I want to show you one more thing. I want to show you the length function. So length function is used to return the length of an array, the size of an array. So let's print the size of an array. First, let's create a variable called length. You don't have to create a variable length. You can use it. You can print it directly. You can print the size directly, but I'm using it for better understanding. Then you have to pass it. Use nums dot. As you can see, now we are getting multiple functions. Then you have to pass it length. Notice this doesn't have curly braces like our string length. So remember the difference between arrays and strings. And let's print the value of length. As you can see, we are getting 6 printed here. And now we got the length of an array. So you can use this to find the total length of the array. Suppose you had hundreds of values here. You can simply use this function to find the total length of an array. So it's very helpful. Uh, Also, let's create a new array called of string type called names, and I wanna show you that you don't have to pass an integer here. You can pass you can pass a variable here as well instead of an direct integer. You can pass an integer variable instead of a value. So now it will create a string array of length 6. So after this, let's also print the length 6. Let's also print length of names dot length. So let's print it. So as you can see, both are of length 6. So what I wanted to show you, you don't have to uh, give a value here like 4, 7. You can pass an integer variable here. A variable could be anywhere in your program as long as it's declared. Let's create a new variable called length 10, length 2. and let's initialize it 100. Now you can pass that into this. Now we have created a string array of length 100 or size 100, so it can hold 100 values. So that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching.